Hello and welcome to Community Seed Keeping and Distribution in Challenging Times. I'm Janine Shepard and I will be your host for this session. In this session, as in all sessions, we ask you to be respectful, curious, and patient, to speak from your own experiences, avoiding jargon, be conscious of intent versus impact, take space, make space, and take care of yourself. Hello, Anna. Thank you so much for being here. Anna Timmerman is an LSU AgCenter Horticulture Agent stationed in the New Orleans area. Anna is currently finishing a master's thesis on containerized citrus at Louisiana State University and plans to pursue her PhD in horticulture while running the Louisiana Citrus Center of Excellence as a research farm in partnership with the Meraux Foundation. She lives and gardens in the upper 9th Ward of New Orleans. Anna is passionate about sustainable local foodways, and she works to preserve these cultural traditions via seed keeping, education programming, and skill shares with other urban growers and eaters in Southeast Louisiana. Today, Anna is here to tell us about how a loose network of community seed keepers developed in response to the COVID-19 lockdowns, 2 hurricanes, and food inequality in the New Orleans metro area. As Anna presents, please feel free to add comments and questions in the chat. There will be time for Q&A at the end. Anna, welcome to the Seed Savers Exchange virtual conference.
Thanks so much for having me. Cue up my PowerPoint real quick. Okay, wonderful. Can you guys see my slides?
There we go. Got it. Thank you.
Okay, thanks everyone again for having me present at this conference. That was a great intro as well. Kind of gives a nice background of what I'm working on here in the greater New Orleans area. I've been here since 2009, so a couple of years after Hurricane Katrina, and I've always sort of worked within this community agriculture space, working either as a local grower or with other growers within the New Orleans area. It's historically been a very diverse foodway. We never really lost the tradition of roadside produce vendors, fresh local seafood. The French market, of course, is a huge tourist attraction. And we have a year-round growing season. So the fact that there is such deep food inequality within our community is a little bit worrying. I think Katrina was a bit of a wake-up call for a lot of folks, and it did bring an influx of nonprofits and different community organizations into our area to try to solve some of the systemic problems that maybe existed before the storm and then were deepened after the storm. With that, we actually got a lot of big pallets of Ed Hume Seed Company seed donated for many years. And those seeds are being saved, kept, passed along, and they're still circulating now almost 16 years after Katrina. So that was pretty inspiring working with that project. And then once COVID-19 hit, my office closed. I work as an extension agent in the New Orleans area. And on a typical day, I might answer 30 to 40 gardening questions from home gardeners, farmers, community growers. But as soon as lockdown hit, my phone started ringing, the emails started pouring in, and I was averaging around 650 questions a day. Most of those were from people who had never grown food before, who were kind of scared about what was going on in the world. We were having a lot of grocery shortages and supply chain issues locally also. So that was kind of an interesting trend to observe. Since my programming stopped, we ceased all in-person teaching and school garden work, things like that I would normally be working on in a calendar year. I was left with a whole year's supply of seeds from that and started packaging them and distributing them from my porch. That kind of snowballed. Other people took note and started the same sort of projects, and we built a loose network of about 23 sites within the New Orleans area where people can access seed free of charge. It's edible seed, it's herbs, it's flowers, and it's also wildflower seed as well. So this presentation will be kind of a how we did it, maybe give you some ideas about thinking very intentionally about barriers to access when it comes to these types of resources, especially within diverse neighborhoods and diverse foodways as well. Not everything is well received here. Kale, for example, was virtually unheard of up until fairly recently within New Orleans culinary tradition. But if you mention collard greens, everyone wants to grow collard greens, right? So thinking about that in kind of a cultural context, I think is very important too. And I'll try to highlight some of that as I walk through this presentation. I do want to make a quick note about the differences between a seed library and a seed bank. Seed libraries lend and share seed with farmers, gardeners, and the general public. Seed banks, however, are more of like a germplasm repository for seed collections used for research. Maybe you're conserving something, you're doing some breeding work. We actually have this as part of my job with LSU, where we're conserving some different seed genomes within the area from South Louisiana, from the diaspora, different populations that lived and inhabited South Louisiana. So I am actually involved in both a seed bank, but also a seed library project. This presentation is about seed libraries. So we want them to be accessible, we want them to be well stocked, and as a general public resource, they're out there. Seed bank materials are typically only available to researchers, plant breeders, botanists, taxonomists, people like me who have maybe some field trials going on each year. So it's not a public resource. It's kind of off limits. Seed libraries, though, they're all about getting things out there into the community. Here's some really good examples of seed banks, not somewhere you can just walk into kind of on a whim. You would not be able to travel there easily by public transit, I'm willing to bet. And you need to have some kind of credential to access these spaces. So they are not public. However, your closest seed library is probably nearer to you than you think. It's not in a bunker somewhere out in the Arctic or under a mountain in Colorado. This is a really great example. Everyone's pretty familiar, I think, with the Little Free Library system, where people lend books to one another, typically in urban or suburban areas. Sometimes I see them by churches, schools, different public spaces like parks. In New Orleans, we actually have the same kind of system, but it's a seed library network. This is one in front of a private residence that was installed during COVID as a way to distribute seed to the community out there in Gentilly, which is a neighborhood near the lake. Seed libraries can be run by people, organizations, schools, municipalities, library systems, nonprofits, and farms. And I will tell you, here in New Orleans, it's all of the above. We have a lot of different individuals running these types of projects, but also our New Orleans public library system, and most recently the suburban public library system in Jefferson Parish, have installed these wonderful card catalogs that function as a seed library. And they're open to checking out up to 5 seed packets per visit to the library per lender. So that's become a really popular part of library programming. I also work with a couple of schools who have school gardens, who teach seed keeping as a part of their curriculum, who are now distributing seeds to the community using a Little Free Seed Library. Lots of nonprofits in our area also distribute seed free of charge. We have a farmer support network called the Greater New Orleans Growers Collective, New Orleans Food and Policy Action Council, and Sprout NOLA, Recirculating Farms Coalition. These are all nonprofits within New Orleans that work not only with farmers and market gardeners, but in educating the public and distributing seeds. So the goal really is to get seeds into the hands of anyone and anyone with the desire to grow something. We're not going to make any kind of barriers as much as possible. In terms of knowledge, you don't need to know how to grow something to try to grow something. We're going to be there to help make that accessible to you. Another goal we're having is to sustain a collection of seed for planting year-round through seed saving and donations. Here in New Orleans, we can plant something every month out of the year. We have maybe 3 days of frost each winter, and we're in 9B, borderline 10A, so it is a subtropical climate. We have 2 tomato seasons. We have 2 potato seasons. This time of year, we're not really growing much other than okra. So it's a bit of our downtime, but we're still out there producing things. So sustaining a collection so we are able to supply people year round, kind of on demand, that's one of the main challenges. And I'll circle back to that in a later slide. The goal is the eventual creation of highly adapted localized varieties and planting guides. On the variety end of things, that means saving seed, trading seed with other growers, and that is happening on a very land race basis, where it's more a hobbyist kind of led movement, where we're getting things that grow here, where it's hot, it's humid. We have a lot of disease pressure from things like southern blight, fusarium, a lot of root rot pathogens like Phytophthora. Because we're getting 65 inches plus of rainfall each year, we're also in a climate pattern right now where we are in the heat indexes of up to 120 each day, and it's not really cooling off at night. So plants are not getting a chance to recover. So we need more resilient varieties to handle a lot of these newer issues that we're seeing in the area. I think it is important to use local seed as much as possible. It does build a more resilient food system because we figure out what works. There's a whole lot of us here in the city and the surrounding area trying things in our own personal gardens because university trials cannot look at all varieties or all crops, right? I work for the Extension Service. Our vegetable specialist is able to look at maybe 30 different tomatoes each year, maybe a dozen peppers. But that's, of course, out of thousands and thousands of those crop varieties that are out there. So we're not able to look at everything. So for me, working with home gardeners and maybe getting something into their hands, hearing what works, what didn't work for them, I love that. That's sort of a real boots on the ground evaluation system that's a little less formalized, but a lot more accessible to people. And folks like reporting back and telling you what worked for them, maybe what didn't work. And we get highly specific results within our local microclimates. We do see a lot of impacts here in New Orleans in the city proper from the city urban heat island effect. That's pretty well documented. And there's a couple of Tulane University research students working on this, where because of all the pavement, the buildings, and reflective material in the city, we're actually staying a little bit warmer even through the cool season. And we do have a lot of little microclimates or pockets where we can get away with things. Recently took a look at a lychee tree, which is a true tropical, but it was on its third year of production out in a very urban space. But it was tucked away kind of in a microclimate next to a brick wall that works as a heat sink. So those kind of things are all factors that we're kind of looking at with this project, more of like a boots on the ground, grassroots, very casual approach to variety trials and development. It does contribute to biodiversity in our local foodways and gardens, diversifying our diets and our habitats. I do want to touch on this because New Orleans has historically always been a port city. We've had many, many different waves of immigration to our area over the years, starting with the indigenous peoples, the Homa, the Chickasaw. They were in the area first, then the Spanish, then the French. We have a huge Caribbean influence, particularly from Haiti, from Trinidad, Tobago, Puerto Rico, a lot of Cubans. We have Vietnamese also. They were brought in because it's a similar climate and they work in a fisheries-based economy that looks very similar here to as it does in their Vietnamese homeland. All of these different waves of immigrants and different cultures that sort of wove into the fabric of Southeast Louisiana brought different crops and different flavors with them. And those are the things we're really trying to seek out. So it might be the cucuzza squash from the Sicilians. It might be the winged beans or the yard-long beans from the Vietnamese gardens. There's a lot of contact happening between these different groups now. I think due in part to COVID and how we all went online, we found each other on Facebook groups, and we're all trading different garden plants, different garden seeds, and it's diversifying our foodway very quickly, I think more rapidly than maybe it ever has in the past. Another goal of this project is enabling people to produce food by removing barriers. When everyone got scared during early lockdown, cost kept coming up. I was answering a ton of questions. Me and some colleagues put together a series of YouTube videos about basic gardening, how to garden at home and produce food at home. It sort of went viral. We had over 30,000 people in the area watch those videos. Cost is what usually comes up as the first barrier to people starting to grow food at home. Well, if I can hand them a packet or two of seeds, that eliminates that cost. And I'll show some other ways that we're doing that as well. Seasonal challenges like drought, tropical storms, hurricanes, we get it all. We also get polar vortexes where it might drop 60 degrees overnight. So really trying to get the knowledge out there, warning people in advance like, hey, this frost is coming. You might want to do this in your garden. It's all part of this as well. And just a lack of general knowledge. We have a disconnect. Back in maybe two generations ago, many people grew at least something in their backyard. It might be a mirliton, which here is what we call a chayote squash. Before Katrina, almost every chain link fence in the city had a mirliton growing on it. The floodwaters obviously removed that. So a lot of people forgot how to grow mirlitons. Maybe their grandma did or their grandfather, but they've lost that knowledge. So putting that kind of generational, traditional foodway know-how back in the hands of people who can use it. I really do see this as a sort of web and a network that it's not a standalone project. We're looking at suburban, urban, and rural growers. I do have some rural farmers saving seed in the area and a lot of home gardens. New Orleans, since we can grow year-round, is a big gardening town. We have the largest green industry segment in our whole state is based here in Orleans Parish. So we have about 30 garden centers that are very active. It's also tying to community gardens and food recovery groups. We have a lot of compost collection nonprofits. There's 3 here in the city and a couple that you can pay to subscribe to. School gardens, youth projects, 4-H and FFA. We have all those different things here as well. And then this is a pretty, I think, unique one to South Louisiana. We are dealing with a lot of subsidence of the land, climate change pressures, and in particular, a lot of stormwater management that's becoming extremely important, where we do get a lot of municipal floods from rainwater. And if we get 8 inches in a day, the pumps can't keep up. So where does the water go? There's a lot of green infrastructure projects getting installed in the area, including in suburban areas where the water can then be sequestered by trees, native plants, things like that, green space in general. There's a lot of seed keeping surrounding that as well. There's recently a call for cypress tree seeds from one of the nonprofits in the area. So people can actually drop off cypress tree seeds from the trees in their yard in a fridge in front of their office at any time. Those seeds will then be germinated, grown to a height of about 2 feet, and then planted in the marsh and different green infrastructure projects. So that's a pretty good local example of a native plant restoration linked seed keeping project here. There's also a renewed emphasis on pollinator gardens. We are a stop for the monarch migration on their way to Mexico. They cross the Gulf from here. We are also a major way station for the hummingbirds when they leave and come back each year. So there's a huge interest in pollinator plants and saving and sharing seeds there as well. But these seed library projects can help connect the dots in a local foodway, creating a human connection through seed saving and sharing. I have met the best people since this project started. It has opened doors to city council. It's opened doors to schools I never knew were there, different tucked away libraries all throughout the city. Just a ton of people are interested in saving seed and gardening who I never knew existed. And we're all kind of networking and connecting dots together. We're sharing ideas. We're sharing resources to a greater extent than ever before because we had to go through COVID and 2 hurricanes. So COVID, the lockdown here hit us very hard. New Orleans is a tourist economy, and I've never seen the French Quarter so quiet. Everything was boarded up. The hotels were housing homeless populations at the time. and there was no tourism. We went from having 80 tourists per year for every resident in this New Orleans area to having maybe 5 in a given year. And it really tanked our economy. A lot of workers were laid off from the convention center, the different restaurants, food service workers. Just anyone in the hospitality industry was suddenly without a job overnight. What happened is a lot of those folks ended up getting some assistance, but then they were home all day and they got really into gardening. And that has kind of survived even now as people are going back to work. They're sticking with it. And in a recent survey, we found about 82% of Orleans Parish residents who started gardening for the first time during COVID are still gardening now several years later. So that I think is very telling, that people are worried about their food supply, but they also learned a new skill during a bad time. And that actually became really important when we had Hurricane Zeta, which was a Category 3 in 2020, of October of 2020. And then right behind it in August of 2021, Category 4 Hurricane Ida passed over us too. Both of those storms really weakened an already fragile food system. We couldn't get fresh butter for about 6 weeks. Eggs were non-existent, no produce, nothing from the freezer aisle. We're looking at dry goods only in most of the groceries for over a month in both cases. And we were still able to harvest produce after the fact. People were trading produce. They were cooking things out of their freezers. Canning and food preservation got really important during that time too. And folks are sticking with it. There's a lot of different classes and things surrounding that, just because we need to have a more resilient local food system and not rely on these larger distribution networks. If we lose power for 16 days or we lose one of the 3 bridges into the city, we all know what that looks like now. And I think people are getting a little more wise to it. So some considerations with these seed projects: sourcing, where will they come from? In our case here, we get a lot of donated seed from the seed companies. Several of us write letters each summer and send thank you notes. We want them to know that they're appreciated. Some seed is purchased, and that usually comes from needing more locally acceptable crops or accepted crops. So that's the collard greens versus the kale, right? I go through a lot of sweet corn seed, a lot of watermelon seed, a lot of collard seed, a lot of okra seed. I run out of those things incredibly fast. Some more unfamiliar crops like maybe endive, trying to think of some others that just kind of sat. Some of the more unusual herbs like chervil, people don't really use them in their daily cooking and diet, so they take a little bit more time to get in the right hands. So purchasing seed can make up for some of that difference. And then seed saving, that's becoming an increasing part of where the seeds for the seed libraries are coming from. People are learning how to save seeds in their own gardens. And I put together a small YouTube video about how to do it in my home garden that people have been sharing. And we're able to keep up a pretty good supply of some of the local favorites just in doing that. So filling some of the gaps for okra, mirliton demand, kukutsa squash demand, things like that, cushaw squash. Things people really seek out, we're able to save seed and keep going from year to year. Storage in tough times also comes up a lot. In many cases, we are storing seed in refrigerators. Refrigerators rely on having a stable power supply. Even in good times, that is asking a lot in the New Orleans area. We have very fragile infrastructure because we do get hammered by so many storms. That's not something we can really rely on, unfortunately. A lot of folks have whole home generators or solar generators, maybe like a Jackery system, but that's not often more to supplement and not able to run a freezer or a refrigerator for very long. One of the solutions that was set up amongst the nonprofits doing seed keeping in our area was to store our bulk seed at local food banks, which run off emergency power supplies. Typically, they're hooked in pretty close to a hospital or something like that. They're able to get hooked back to the grid maybe a little faster. So there's actually 3 community centers / food banks that are connected to emergency power where we are storing seed free of charge. So that's one thing. With the seed bank and some of our more hard to procure, maybe rarer heirloom seeds, the plan is that one community member is going to evacuate to Colorado and bring them in ice chests to his dad's house. And we haven't had to run that scenario yet, but we all know what to do. We know where to leave our seeds so he can pick them up before he leaves town. And that's just one more way of protecting them from the climate, from sitting in an unair-conditioned space or a fridge that's going to get moldy and really gross, and saving those things from loss. Pests are also a huge concern here. We have 2 kinds of rats. We have the Norway rats. We have roof rats, which are a more tropical species. We are Cockroach City, USA. They will eat seeds as well. We consistently rank as #1 when it comes to pests. So it is important to store things properly here and not put huge trays of seed out to dry without also protecting them from primarily rodent pests. Packaging, that's really important too. Our typical New Orleans garden is on a 60-foot by 120-foot lot with a shotgun house on it. So we have a very small footprint for growing, typically a small front yard, maybe a bigger backyard. And then in between the shotguns is usually up for grabs as well. Maybe there's a chain link fence down the middle. It's a really narrow growing space. So most gardeners that we are distributing seed to, if you look at a lettuce seed packet, sometimes there's up to 30,000 seeds in that packet. Your average home gardener is not going to ever use that many lettuce seeds in a given year. So we will break those packages into smaller packages that are more suited for a home garden or a New Orleans footprint. That might mean a package of 30 to 40 pumpkin or squash seeds will get bumped into maybe 8 or 9 packages with 6 seeds each. And that seems more appropriate for our area. Labor is a huge concern. Who maintains the seed inventory and packages seed? It is a labor of love. A lot of us do it at home when we get home from work, might pop on Netflix. We might get together and do potluck style seed filling. We've done that a couple of times now that lockdown has ended. There's a pretty active group of master gardeners and junior master gardeners in the area that can also package seed and return it. That's been done a bunch. And then many of the schools, their seniors are required to do a service project. So they will also sometimes package seed and distribute it to the community as a part of their service-based learning. It ties in really well to maybe some social science lessons about the food economy, the history of New Orleans, the different groups that have settled it. So it's a good tie-in for them. Distribution, fixed locations, accessibility, mailing perhaps. What we found in New Orleans is accessibility means it's got to be close to a bus line or a streetcar line. So a fixed location that's accessible 24/7, 365, near public transit is usually going to distribute more seed than if we keep the collection inside a place of business or maybe an office. That's really intimidating to a lot of new gardeners, especially. When they come in, they don't want to sign in, they don't want to sign out. It's more easy for them to just open a little free seed library and access those things kind of on their own time. Mailing became really important, though, during lockdown, where we did have some immune compromised folks who were gardening who didn't want to go anywhere to pick seed up. So we would mail at our own expense. We would mail packages of seed to them. Here's a little bit about sourcing. We do get a lot of seed in the area from pretty much all the seed companies. Some of them do require a tax exemption number or a letter from your employer. Some of them only take requests certain times of year also. It's really important to make note of that and not badger them too much. Make sure you have your ducks in a row. If they do need a tax exemption number, maybe work with a community organization if you don't have one of your own. There's no guarantee either in what you're going to get. It can be anything and anything. And what we've found here in New Orleans 9B is often we will get seed that is a crop that we just don't grow here because it's too hot, too subtropical, or the seeds will arrive when it's not the right time to plant that crop. So we have to store them until the following season when it is time to grow those leafy greens, when the nighttime temperatures do finally get below 70. So things to think about. There may be a shipping cost to cover. It's good to have a little kitty of money or some funds to cover that. It's typically between $25 to $30 to get a box of seeds shipped somewhere. What we've found too is that a lot of the local big box stores and garden centers, and we found this out this year, the dollar stores too, they have seeds that they donate when they switch to the new seasonal displays. So if you can walk into these places, introduce yourself, leave your contact info ahead of time, when they're ready to pull that year's seed display, usually it ends up in the trash. So this is a really good thing to get on in terms of resource recovery. Those seeds are still good. They might have slightly decreased germination rates, but you can save them from the trash and get them in the hands of people who need them. In terms of saving seed, we've done a number of workshops here locally for people who are interested in saving seed, and that really increased the number of seeds coming in from people's home gardens or their little urban farms or even rural farms where they're interested in preserving varieties that they really like. So doing some kind of educational program, really, it could be a YouTube video. We did a couple of hands-on workshops at the Botanical Garden. Just get that knowledge to the right people. They do have to be collected, cleaned, and stored properly to stay viable, so make sure that's a part of your curriculum as well. We have gotten some very funky cross-pollinated things and hybrids back once we did grow some things out, particularly with peppers and cucurbits. So always be upfront about, well, did you isolate the flowers? Did you prevent pollination? Did you hand pollinate? That comes up where we'll hand out sometimes what we thought was bell pepper seed, and it ends up being something with a lot of heat to it and not so bell peppery. So that's an education hurdle that you need to keep in mind if you're using saved seeds from the community. Storage. This is how I recommend people do it when they join our loose network. I have a couple of fridges in the back room of my shotgun house where this is what it looks like. This is pretty organized though compared to what I have. Ideally, you want a low temperature, low humidity. That is next to impossible in our climate. So we will actually use the little silica packets like you get with some dry goods. You can buy those in bulk. Amazon has the best price, and you just toss a couple of those in each of these boxes, and that helps with the humidity problem. Avoiding the huge swings in temperature can be a real challenge here. Most of our homes are not insulated. Most of them do not have central heat or central air. They are raised off the ground. They have big windows and doors that open. It's a natural form of controlling the temperature in the house. But that means sometimes it's 45 in the house. Sometimes it's 100 degrees in the house. So you just have to do your best. A mini fridge or a refrigerator can help buffer some of that. There's no perfect way around that, unfortunately, unless you have central air or heat, which most of us here do not. Organizing and labeling can save you a lot of time. It really does pay to figure out what you have, use the older seed first, and kind of cycle through things before you get to the newer stuff. I like using airtight containers. I actually got a bunch of Ziploc bags about the size of an index card from COVID tests. So they were actually throwing those away. They had expired, but the bags were able to be reused for storing seeds. That was a partnership with one of the local community centers where they donated that. It was a recycled material. They work great for storing seeds. Packaging. Where are they going? That's an important question. A school garden's probably going to use a different amount compared to a home grower. This is something that we figured out pretty early on where folks can't use 30,000 lettuce seeds in a season. We grow lettuce for about 3 months. There's no way you're going to eat that much in a given household either. We can conserve seed by packaging it for what the clientele needs or what each group needs. That became really important during lockdown. There was a seed shortage because people were buying and hoarding so much. And there were some crop failures that contributed to low numbers of seed in certain areas. So we got really savvy about, let's just hand out what we know people are going to plant. We use the #1 coin envelopes. It's like a tiny manila envelope. You can get a pack of 500 for $16 off Amazon. And for example, this 3,000 seeds in this standard pack of lettuce, we will put 1 gram in each of those #1 coin envelopes, and it's about 600 seeds. So we are able to bust a lot of these seed packets up from traditional seed companies into 5 or even 10 different packages. It does take a lot of time, though. Labeling. I do like to put the original package in a binder within the seed library so they have access to a lot of the information on the back of the seed packet, in particular. The plant spacing, planting depth, that's the row spacing, things like that. Even though we all ignore that in our home gardens anyway, I like to have that out there for people to flip through and see what the produce is going to look like when they grow it. This is a pretty standard representation of the info that our volunteers put on the seed packets. It'll say radish, and then it'll say the cultivar. So we've got radish gourmet blend. That's it. We're going to put that into the seed library for people to come pick up. If they want more info, they can take a look at the original packaging. We will occasionally make notes on the little seed envelopes if it's treated seed, if it's been treated with any kind of fungicide, insecticide. People are really adverse to that here. They prefer organic or untreated seed. So if it is treated, we label that very clearly on the packages to be distributed. Sometimes we'll highlight if something is a local heirloom or if it's rare. If it has medicinal qualities, we do have 2 herb farmers in my neighborhood who save seed and distribute things. If it's native, Louisiana native plants are really popular here for their stormwater mitigation abilities and their pollinator attracting qualities. So we will label them if they're Louisiana natives. And anything of note, if it needs to soak before you plant it, if it's best to scarify it, if it's really old seed or it gets low germination in our germ tests, we will make a note of that on the package so people don't get discouraged. Especially with new growers, if they dump a pack of seed out and nothing happens, but it was a low germination pack that we were trying to clear out, we don't want them to feel bad about that, right? We want to encourage as much as possible. I will also note on packages if something is a dwarf cultivar or something a little more compact that might be good for containers or small spaces, because we do have a lot of container gardeners in the city especially. They might be gardening in a French Quarter courtyard or a balcony using all containers, so a determinate tomato makes more sense for them than an indeterminate tomato. Labor, where's the collection going to live? I do have one at my house. Most of our partners have them storing seeds either at their house or one of the community centers or in an office space. We've all utilized interns, different community members, and it takes a lot of time to sort through an inventory and keep this thing up. I have 3 fridges now at my house for this thing. And that's a cost, of course, to run them. So it is part of the volunteer part. Who will protect it from disasters? So if you live in a place with wildfires or floods or hurricane threats, even tornadoes, we had 2 tornadoes that followed approximately the same pathway through the same neighborhood in the last 18 months. So that's a new thing to consider here. Who's going to maintain that? Because one of the tornadoes did pass directly over the Arabi Community Center. And one of the first things we checked on after we found out everyone was okay in there is, do you have power? Because there is a deep freeze full of seeds in there. And if that thaws out, then we need to do something pretty quickly. So checking in with where you're saving seeds and storing your seeds. It takes approximately 3 hours to fill 500 packets. That's what we tell our volunteers. But that can be really good to do if you're like watching the news or listening to a podcast. You don't need, your eyes. You can use your hands and do something else while you're filling seed packets. Distribution. This is my little seed library in front of my house. It's accessible 24/7. It's very public. There is a bus stop for the Desire neighborhood bus route that stops right across the street from here, and people can access it if they pull up. There's plenty of free parking in front of the house. I see people stopping by on bicycle, and I see a lot of folks who walk up to this as well, who live maybe nearby in the neighborhood. So very public. There's different kinds of seed libraries too. This little seed library came from the Little Free Library, the book program. Our Boy Scouts put these together, and you can buy them fairly affordably, and they will even install them for you too. So there might be some resources in your area for getting something like this. You can also purchase a kit online and paint it however you'd like. Here's a couple more examples, though. With the public libraries, they're using their old card catalogs. I think this is very clever. Some of the pros, our public libraries are super, super well attended here. People love the libraries because they are a community space that's free. They will help you apply for jobs, fill out SNAP applications, all kinds of stuff. They do have set hours. The librarians are very good at organizing, which means they're super great at maintaining seed collections. And it's a fixed location. Usually everyone knows where their closest library is. There's some cons to the libraries, though. Limited library open hours, and they do put a cap on how many packets you can check out each time you visit. You can have 4 or 5, depending on which branch you visit here, just so somebody doesn't take everything all at once. Events and tabling. This is Sprout Nola's seed basket. Anytime they're out tabling at an event, they are distributing these free seeds to the community that they use their volunteers to package up. I really like when they show up to an event because it's a broad outreach opportunity. You can partner with other attractions. Usually it'll be like a community health clinic where they're doing free blood pressure tests. During COVID, of course, it was the COVID testing lines. So you get a pack of seed when they're swabbing you. It's a great way to reach new gardeners, and it's a low barrier to engagement, right? You can hand someone a pack of seeds and say, yeah, it's free. Give it a try. You might be surprised. You might be able to grow some sunflowers or okra in your backyard easier than you thought. You can also target specific audiences through tabling events like garden shows, farmers markets. It's really popular to table at those here and reach people who are interested in growing things. Some cons, maybe not open to the general public. Maybe some of these events are charging admission. That is a barrier. You have to haul in, set up, take down, and there's limited open hours. I found when we've tabled at the garden shows in the botanical gardens, it's a $15 fee to get into that show. And the clientele that are taking seeds changes completely. It becomes less diverse and it becomes more wealthy. So that's something to keep in mind too. The little free library method, I think, is really the way to go. You can reach a lot of people. It's open 24/7. There are some cons, though. Pretty much everyone I know that has one of these in front of their house has had either somebody come take everything and clear it out overnight, or vandalize it, break the glass, knock it over, hit it with a car. We've kind of seen it all. The key to that is just put it right back up and fill it up again. Persistence. That really does, eventually they give up. So it might be discouraging to spend 3 or 4 hours to fill 500 seed packets and have somebody take them and scatter them all over the neighborhood, and then it rains. That just comes with a territory. You have to be prepared for that. Seeds do need to be stocked frequently in high temperatures. Like right now, our heat index is well above 100, and that is not good seed weather. If you are a seed, you can actually cook inside one of these, especially if the glass is facing the sun in the afternoon. It can get really hot inside these. So I will only put out a few packets a day, maybe about 20 packets a day this time of year. From a stockpile within the house, and that's a good way to kind of get around that. This is exposed to the elements. When we have hurricanes or tropical storms, water can get in along the edges, so it's a good idea to clear it out before a storm, or even just take it down if you can. Usually they unscrew from the base, the library does from the post, and bring it in if you're experiencing one of those weather events. A lot of the seed keepers here have developed other kind of incentives or add-ons, I like to call them, where they might be giving out free plants, because a lot of us are starting plants for our own gardens or maybe different projects that we're working with. So we put our extras out and people come take them for their gardens. A couple of them are doing these community compost drop-offs, which is really great. If people don't want to have their own compost pile at their house, they can freeze their food scraps and bring them by and drop them off, pick up some packs of seed and go home. A lot of us are putting our extra produce out on these little tables as well. Handouts, secondhand gardening supplies or books. I can get soil test kits through my job, so I try to get those to as many people as possible, usually in boxes of 100, so they can have those out there as well. And then we've actually gotten some municipal mulch donations, especially following hurricanes, where when they grind up the trees that blow over, the branches that fall, they will drop that mulch off near the free libraries and people come get it for their gardens. We've had soil donated as well, especially during lockdown for people who need to fill raised beds or containers. A couple of the different garden centers actually delivered 4 or 5 yards of soil to several locations so people could come fill buckets, take them home, and grow in that soil. Here's a good picture of the soil test kits next to the seeds, which are all labeled. This is a free plant giveaway here where that was all leftovers from our garden show. And then we're also doing a horticultural plastic recycling kind of system, very loosely too. So if you have pots and trays like this, you can drop them off at the little seed libraries, put them in these shelving units, and folks can reuse them to start their own seeds or start a container garden, something like that. So it keeps a lot of that out of the waste stream. We've had some assistance from the city too. This is a mulch pile that the Sewer and Water Board dropped off in front of my house, and that mulch all disappeared within 3 days. Different gardeners coming to get it. Sorting and organizing. I do think this saves a lot of time if you can keep things separate and well labeled. I also like to sort things into the seasons where they're appropriate to grow. So here that means fall, then cool season, which isn't really that cool here. It's still in the 70s and 80s in the winter time. Annuals, wildflowers, so kind of categorizing them. These kind of pre-made bundles do kind of make it go easier and saves time. If you live in an area where your power can and will go out, which is most of us, waterproof containers are a big must. Accidents do happen. The doors of fridges and freezers can get propped open by maybe kids or unplugged by accident from somebody working in your house. We have a lot of frequent power outages. And when those freezers and fridges thaw out, there's a lot of condensation inside, or maybe the freezer is above and it starts to defrost and that water trickles down. So having all your seeds in waterproof containers or bags is a really, really good way to do this. It saves you a lot of heartache. Curating the seeds does need to happen to some extent. We do get seed donated that will not grow in our hardiness zone. So I usually donate it to friends up north in the Chicago area, and then they distribute it there. Send it where it can get used. Don't let it go to waste. Know the cultivars for different things that are recommended in your area. For example, some of the more northern type melons or long or short day types of onions just don't work here. So know your plant material as much as you can. Always try to get the oldest seed out first. Save your newest seed for later. On the label, really do note if it's treated, pelleted seed, or old seed with potentially low germination. Try to get rid of it. And then only put seeds out during the time that it is to grow that. That was something we learned kind of the hard way, where we're like, oh, we have all these seeds, we'll fill it up. Here's like 30 different crops. Well, it's not time to plant pumpkins. It's not time to plant Brussels sprouts. So we're going to save those seeds and put them out when it is time for those things. So really kind of curating for the seasons. Seeding schedules are kind of all over the place for us, but I do make that information available to people within the seed library through an open source document you can find online, and then I print hard copies and put them inside the seed library, and they're actually used throughout the city. This is the old one that was developed by the Food and Farm Network here in New Orleans after Katrina, And you can see it's just a really good, print it out, put it on your fridge so you don't forget. A little guide about what to seed in what month. This has since expanded into a month-specific planting guide for New Orleans. This is used by all the libraries now as well, where we're breaking it into vegetable crops, herbs, flowers, fruit, native plants, and any notes like when to put cover crops in, stuff like that. We break it into if it's time to plant that from a transplant, directly sow it, take cuttings or other vegetative propagation techniques. If you should seed it indoors, we have 2 tomato seasons here in New Orleans. The first one, we seed our tomatoes indoors under lights right after New Year's. We plant by Valentine's Day, so February 14th, and then they're pretty much done by the first week of June. It's now time for our second tomato season where we have the opposite problem. It's a little too hot outside for them. So we will actually seed our trays indoors under lights in July or early August, plant by the end of August, and then they go in through December. So having that kind of information is really valuable for gardeners, especially if they're new, and where to source things, when to plant your fruit trees, all of that is on here. We also have a lot of extension publications that we circulate through the seed libraries. Every state has a cooperative extension service, and they'll have these little kind of PDF guides you can print off and put in there as well. This is a vegetable guide where it tells the recommended varieties for Louisiana. However, we will throw seeds that are not on this list into the seed library system, no problem. We do kind of want to get in a habit of acquiring new seeds each calendar year. So right now I am in the letter writing cycle and filling out forms online to get donations. What helps is to have a personal story or some stats on how many seeds you distributed last year when you were asking for seeds in the coming year. I will get photos from different school gardens or homeowners who are growing a garden from the first time through Facebook. And sometimes I'll send that with a thank you note, just so they know that things are going to a good cause and their seeds are really actually feeding people here in New Orleans. I have bought maybe 20 copies of the Seed to Seed book from Suzanne Ashworth and given them to people who save seed for the community. So we're all on the same page. It's a really good guide to kind of get people started who are really serious about saving seed properly. I talked about the seed keeping classes, partnering with other organizations. Periodically, we will do a seed swap. This is usually at our grower meetings where we're meeting with other urban farmers, and we will bring our extra seeds and swap them amongst ourselves and amongst growers and organizations, so we all have a little bit of something. This is a spreadsheet too. I wanted to show what's possible. Just a simple Excel spreadsheet of all the different seed companies, and then a breakdown of who to contact, do you need a tax exemption letter, and then notes about what any kind of special hoops you need to jump through, like you have to pay for shipping. If you had a disaster, there's a separate disaster relief option for Seed Savers Exchange, things like that. And then I mark if I had success getting a donation from them each year. So I can keep track of that. And this is something that everyone could make fairly easily. And it's a really useful tool. A lot of the seed companies will send promo items. Be sure you put those out. I know you've seen them in a couple of my slides where it'll say seeds donated by blah, blah, blah company. Make sure you display those. It's really important that people know where the seeds are coming from. A thank you goes a really long way. If you can, do a social media post and tag whatever company's seed you used. If you've got a kid holding up a bunch of beets they grew for the first time, and you know those seeds for the beets came from Baker Creek, tag Baker Creek and say thank you. And then I send thank you cards out to everybody too. It goes a long way towards making this work. I also keep track of the number of packets of seed that get distributed in a given year. It's just a simple tally on a whiteboard per 500 seed packs, which is a box. That shows a lot of good impact, especially if you're looking for grant applications or funding sources or you're presenting to another organization or city council about the project, just to kind of show the impacts. I also keep a running list of organizations, schools, community gardens that receive care packages of seeds each year. That shows additional impact. Photos are always great, and have all that on hand so you can chase down opportunities when they come your way. Just in front of my house in 2021, I sent out 35,000 packs of seeds. In 2022, it was closer to 55,000. I need to update this slide. And this year we're on track for about that. So it does kind of spiral out of control. It's a really great thing to do, and many hands make light work. So developing these kind of loose networks, meeting other gardeners who want to save seed, who maybe can sit down and put together a box of 500 seed packets. That's really important. And here's a quick map. You can see, it's a little hard to see. All the red dots represent seed libraries in the metro area. And there's actually additional ones in the suburbs now where people can come and grab seeds whenever. And this is me during COVID, and that's Mayor LaToya Cantrell. So even the mayor came to get free seeds during lockdown when we did our community health clinic. Really build that network. Don't be afraid to tell people about it, and connect with other people who share this grassroots kind of value system in your area. This is my contact info, and that is the address for the actual seed library. If you're ever in New Orleans, please, please, please look me up. Feel free to stop by, grab some seeds. And I'm happy to give suggestions about where to eat, things like that. It's always great to meet fellow seed keepers and people who love this kind of work. Feel free to get in touch as well if you have any questions. And with that, I will pass it back over.
Anna, thank you so much. This was an impressive slideshow and an impressive amount of work that you've been doing.
Thank you.
So impressed. We have just about 3 minutes, but we do have some questions that have come in. So let's see how many we can get to. The first one is from Susanna. She's saying, do you have a public notification system for reaching out to tell people who don't already know about these seed libraries?
Yeah, social media is the #1 tool. There's a really great Facebook group that was created after COVID kind of got everyone into gardening called How NOLA Grows Dat, Tips and Tricks for Everyone. That's where we're all posting our availability of seeds.
Nice.
Yep.
Travis is asking, is there, maybe this is the same question, is there a central communication center or plan within the community?
We have found it's easier to kind of do your own thing, know where everyone is, and get the word out as much as you can at different community events, social media posts, things like that. Yep, very loose.
And Kelsey is asking, how do you create a hyper-local seeding guide?
Oh, okay. I'm glad you asked that, because I have all 12 months as a one-page guide, and it took me 3 years to develop that. Wow. It meant using our state extension planting guide and their suggested planting dates and comparing that to the soil temperature in New Orleans each week. So it's something I tracked using Excel, and our planting dates are typically 2 to 3 weeks earlier here than in Baton Rouge, which is where that guide was originally developed. So it can be as simple as setting it up so you've got one page for each of the 12 months, put in what you know works, and then tweak it seasonally each month. I sit down for about an hour each month and adjust.
That's amazing. Sean is asking about seed library software. It sounds like Sean is using spreadsheets, binders, and folders, but would like a more sophisticated way of doing these things.
Me too. I use Excel for everything when it comes to tracking this all. So I haven't come up with a better system, unfortunately.
I'm curious how many people you would estimate are part of this loose network. It sounds like so much work, and it must be a significant number of people as well.
It is. There's 14 hosts where they have them in front of their homes, like their personal property. There's about 6 nonprofits doing it, and there are now 8 branches of the New Orleans Public Library as well. But in terms of volunteers and the effort there, it's a ton of people. We have 270 master gardeners in New Orleans, and I would say maybe 25% of them have filled seed packets. We also get interns from the local colleges. We have quite a few here in town. Xavier University, Dillard, Tulane, Loyola, and they will help also as part of their internship. They'll learn to collect seed, save seed, and fill packets.
Yeah, nice. Well, thank you so much. This has been so informative and inspiring. I really appreciate your time. Thanks all for joining us, and best of luck with all of the seed endeavors you are all working on.
Thank you.